Hey guys, today I'll show you a mystery film called Angels and Demons. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The story begins in a church. A group of cardinals is gathering as they try to destroy the ring called the Ring of the Fisherman. After the Pope dies, they then proceed to seal a papal apartment for 9 days of mourning, and this period is known as Si Vacante, or the time of the empty throne. People from all over the world gather as they mourn for the Pope's death, hoping to have a new leader that can unite them. In a laboratory, two scientists are arguing as they can't seem to agree with each other. Dr. Vittoria then leaves and her colleague proceeds with their experiment. Dr. Vittoria talks to another scientist and he says that they are scared. The scientist tells them that if they don't harvest now, then they never will be able to. As they proceed, they manage to contain antimatter in a canister. As Vittoria heads down to where the other scientist is, she gasps as she sees an eyeball on the floor. She rushes to find the other scientist in the laboratory. After a while, she ends up finding the scientist's dead body without one of his eyeballs. She screams for help, devastated with what she has encountered, and one of the canisters with the antimatter inside is lost. In another scene at Harvard University, Professor Robert is swimming when a man approaches him. The man then introduces himself as a Vatican police officer. The officer tells him that he was tasked to find Professor Robert Langdon. In a matter of great urgency, he then shows an ambigram to the professor, which results in Professor Robert quickly getting up from the pool. The officer and Professor Robert discuss an ambigram that shows the word Illuminati. Professor Robert then says that somebody is trying to make them believe that the Illuminati themselves have returned to Rome right after the death of the Pope. The officer tells them that 4 cardinals were kidnapped from their quarters inside the Vatican, and that shortly afterward, a document was sent to the office of the Swiss Guard, along with a threat that the cardinals will be executed publicly 1 per hour, starting at 8 o'clock tonight in Rome. Professor Robert is speechless about what the officer said. He then adds that if Robert can use the ambigram to learn the identity of the Illuminati, then perhaps they can stop the abomination. He then tries to convince the professor to go with him. Professor Robert comes along with him in the helicopter. The officer discusses that if the Illuminati is in Rome, then they will find and kill him. Robert then adds that the Illuminati did not become violent until the 17th century. He also explains that the Illuminati were physicists, mathematicians, and astronomers who were concerned about the church's inaccurate teaching. So the Vatican didn't like that and began to hunt and kill them. In the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City, Professor Robert and the officer arrive. The Inspector General of the Vatican Police Force welcomes them. They head towards the headquarters of the Swiss Guard. Professor Robert then takes a seat as they arrive. Things were getting complicated as they received another threat from the kidnapper. Dr. Vittoria shares her story about the death of her research partner in their laboratory yesterday. Vittoria tells them that a canister was stolen at the same time, and that if they don't bring the stolen canister back, the Vatican City will be consumed by light. Professor Robert hands out the ambigram, explaining that it might be a revenge for La Purga. They then continue to analyze the video that was sent by the kidnapper. Robert starts to insist on accessing the archives in order to stop the execution of the cardinals. Il Camerlengo asks the Comandante if he has already started the search for the explosive device. The Comandante then nods and replies that it could be anywhere. His primary concern is the safety of the cardinals. As the conversation begins to heat up between them, Il Camerlengo tells the Comandante that when he is addressing him, he is addressing the office as a whole. Then their argument ends there. Il Camerlengo asks Dr. Vittoria about who else knew about the antimatter project. Dr. Vittoria replies to him that no one else but the research team knew. She also adds that if her research partner had ever told anyone else, then he would have made a note of it in his journal. Il Camerlengo then tells them that he may grant the professor access to the archives. But before he does that, he first asks Professor Robert if he believes in God. The professor honestly and sincerely replies that faith is a gift that he has yet to receive. After answering truthfully, Il Camerlengo finally grants him his permission. As they are heading towards the archives, they discuss and address the problem and its connection to the history of the church. On the other hand, Il Camerlengo approaches Cardinal Strauss, saying that they should evacuate the Vatican City. But the cardinal refuses and insists on continuing the conclave, as he thinks that panic and attention are what the Illuminati wants. As Il Camerlengo fails to convince the cardinal, he leaves and locks the doors, and the conclave starts. In the archives, Professor Robert and Dr. Vittoria arrive and head to the Il Processo Galliano, where the clue could be found. A man in an empty room appears after receiving mail in his laptop. He heads toward a room where the 4 kidnapped cardinals were jailed. It turns out that this man was the man behind this chaos. Now back to where the professor is. The professor grabs the book titled The Diagram of Truth. As they analyze the book, they discover a hidden text. Dr. Vittoria suddenly tears the page and hides it inside her jacket. They rush towards the oldest Catholic church in Rome, expecting it to be the church where one of the cardinals will be executed. But after a while, they realize that they went to the wrong church. They hurriedly head to the Earth's chapel. The bell rings as soon as they arrive, indicating the execution of one of the cardinals is about to happen. They head inside in Anulus and arrive at the Chi Chapel. They discover a manhole and get inside of it. There they find the dead body of the cardinal. They see a burnt sign on his skin that says Earth, while his body is being devoured by rats. As the conclave proceeds, people outside gather as they wait for the next pope to be announced. Meanwhile, Professor Robert and Dr. Vittoria continue to search for the clues that can give them a lead. They later arrive at St. Peter's Square 2 minutes before 9 o'clock at night. After searching and looking around, they see the bloody body of the cardinal appear with the burnt sign on the skin that says Air. The crowd was in chaos after witnessing what had occurred. Professor Robert then quickly heads back to the archives to look for a new clue. On the other hand, Il Camerlengo asks Dr. Vittoria what other signs does the dead body bear if the Holy Father was given an overdose of tinzaparin, a medication the father used for his maintenance medicine. Dr. Vittoria responds and tells him about the bleeding of the mucosa of his tongue. After Dr. Vittoria finishes her explanation, Il Camerlengo asks Dr. Vittoria to come with him. Back to Professor Robert's scene, they are analyzing the texts and writings on the book. Then the alarm suddenly goes off with a beeping noise, making them realize that they are trapped inside with no oxygen to breathe. Professor Robert and his companion are struggling as they run out of oxygen. But with the professor's efforts, they manage to break their way outside before he collapses, and the power suddenly goes back. As they arrive at the Vatican grottos, they quickly analyze the dead body of the Pope to know if their suspicion was true, as they suspected the Pope was murdered. After Professor Robert leaves the archives, they head to the next church. On the other hand, Il Camerlengo infiltrates the conclave to inform the cardinals. He tries to convince the cardinals about the chaos that's happening, to evacuate the city, and to tell the whole world the truth. Professor Robert arrives at the Santa Maria della Vittoria. The bell rings, and so they rush inside, only to find the cardinal currently getting burned, leaving a burnt sign on his chest that says Fire. They try to help the cardinal, as he lets out a blood-curdling scream out of pain. Then suddenly, the man who disguised himself as a Swiss guard attacks them. The Inspector General dies, and the guards are wiped out, preventing them from saving the cardinal. As the man attempts to shoot Professor Robert, the cardinal falls to the fire. Professor Robert escapes underground and ends up in a place filled with skulls. Meanwhile, the cardinals refuse to stop the conclave. On the other hand, Dr. Vittoria is trying to get her journal that was confiscated by the Comandante. Dr. Vittoria was suspicious of the Comandante, and she asks him if he had something to hide. The Comandante grins and throws her question back at her. After Professor Robert successfully escapes, he analyzes the statue while being surrounded by rescuers inside the chapel. The police officers insist on escorting him back to the Vatican, but the professor angrily refuses as he wants to continue the search. The police then change his mind and escort the professor to the last location. They arrive at the Fountain of the Four Rivers in Piazza Navona. A suspicious black van is waiting by the fountain. The police decide to approach it. It turns out the man in the van is the same man who kidnapped the cardinals. The man then shoots the police. The bell rings, the man then throws one of the cardinals in the fountain, leaving him to drown. The professor tries to quickly run and chase him, but the man drives off, completely escaping. Professor Robert had no choice but to jump to the fountain and rescue the cardinal himself. As the professor screams for help, people gather to help him and the cardinal. They manage to rescue the cardinal with a burnt sign on his chest that says water. Then the police quickly rush to the scene. They head to Castel Sant'Angelo, where the kidnappers are keeping the cardinals. Dr. Vittoria and Professor Robert reunite, hoping to catch the man behind the chaotic situation. Dr. Vittoria then tells the professor that they can't trust the Commandant. Vittoria tells him that the Commandante took her research partner's journals, which only indicates that there's something in the journal he doesn't want them to see. They head inside the chapel to look for the canister. They discover the black van with the dead bodies of the police officers inside. Professor Robert enters the hidden passageway and arrives at the chapel. The kidnapper hides and observes quietly as he eyes the both of them. They run to look for Il Camerlengo and warn him of his future demise, that the man would kill him next. Suddenly, the man shows himself, pointing a gun at them. The man warns Dr. Vittoria and Professor Robert that if they don't stop following him, he will kill them both. The man then escapes. In another scene, the Commandante approaches Il Camerlengo. Professor Robert and Dr. Vittoria quickly run to chase the man, and the kidnapper tries to drive off, but the car suddenly explodes. As Dr. Vittoria and Professor Robert warn the guard, they rush to see Il Camerlengo. Fortunately, they got to help the Camerlengo, but he was already burnt with the sign of the fifth brand. After a few moments, they realize that the bomb is in St. Peter's tomb. They head to the necropolis, and there they discover the canister, but its battery is running low and close to exploding. Il Camerlengo runs with the canister in the helicopter with intentions to sacrifice himself. The antimatter explodes in the air, but miraculously, the Camerlengo is spared by the explosion and is alive. People then gather to help him. Meanwhile, the Swiss guard spreads the word of salvation to the cardinals, who were in the middle of the conclave. After a few moments, the cardinals are discussing the nominating of Il Camerlengo as the new pope, though Cardinal Strauss is not fond of this idea. The cardinals ask the Camerlengo to join them in the conclave as soon as possible. Dr. Vittoria attempts to get her research partner's journals back, curious about what the Comandante was trying to hide. Professor Robert watches the hidden camera footage in the Holy Father's office to unveil more unanswered questions. They are left in shock upon finding out what happened between the Il Camerlengo and the Commandant. It turns out that Camerlengo was the man behind all of the occurrences. Dr. Vittoria and Professor Robert notify the cardinals about the footage. As Il Camerlengo arrives at where the conclave is being held, the cardinals gather with a very disappointed gaze. Il Camerlengo leaves, trying to run away as the Swiss guards chase him. He heads down and burns himself, resulting in his death. The new Pope and Camerlengo offer a token of appreciation to Professor Robert for saving one of the cardinals' lives and for protecting the church. The new Pope appears, and the crowd applauds. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.